Good morning, everyone. Thank you for joining us for this early morning hot topic session on what I think is an extremely important topic, which is professional development in limited technology environments. We have two great panels lined up for you, so welcome those that are joining us in person and those that may be joining us online. We're going to have two panels, the first of which is going to be presented by three panelists. Christel Broady from Georgetown College and Kentucky TESOL here in the US, Mary Allegra from TESOL and the University of Carabobo in Venezuela, and Monica Fernandez, also from the University of Carabobo in Venezuela. Their topic today is building capacity for call professional learning and growth in countries with struggling economies and limited resources. This is a replicable model of success. This first session is going to introduce a sustainable capacity building model for call training that uses professional learning community principles that can be replicated in other locations with similar economic and technological infrastructure challenges. This approach uses a deliberate train-the-trainer model that delivers ELT-related call knowledge from the bottom up. Welcome to our first presenters.
Good morning. So thank you so much for coming this morning, because I know the keynote, the presidential note is going on, and so I really appreciate it. I know everybody who's here really wants to be here, so thank you for being here. We already did the introduction. I'm presenting together with panel members from Venezuela, and it's a real honor for me to have you here to present together. I'm presenting from down here, so I can see the screen better. And I was hoping that it works, but we tried it out before. Obviously, can you? All right. So I'm Christel Broady, and I went to Venezuela on behalf of the State Department to work with the Venezuelan TESOL to build capacity. And so, do we have everything right?
Everything's fine.
Okay. So we first wanted to touch on the basis of what is going on in Venezuela and why the project was so important, and what we were trying to achieve, and to set the backdrop for every one of us in case not everybody is familiar with the situation in Venezuela. Mary Allegra, the TESOL president, is setting the stage for us to give you a background of why we did the project.
I'll be here. I'm too short. Christel is higher, so I think the camera could take her from any place in the room. Well, thank you very much for attending our presentation today. I'm here to talk a little bit about the situation. The title of this part of the presentation is Venezuela, a country in crisis, ELT situation. All right, I think everybody knows a little bit about the situation in Venezuela for 18 years, and it has affected every area of education and other areas, but specifically of education. We need to remember that the use of new technologies in English language teaching is generally associated with higher resource contexts in such developed countries, right? People who have money, or countries with money, or powerful countries, those are the countries which would be associated with, with the use of technologies. In the case of Venezuela, it is a country. Venezuela is considered an underdeveloped country, and digital technologies have been deployed within ELT, right? But it is considered to be a low resource context, right? As places like Afghanistan, Rwanda, and other countries in Latin America, like Uruguay or Peru or Bolivia, etc. We need to say that the use of effective technology, and not only, I think, if we make an effort, not only depends on having money to buy the hardware and the infrastructure for using the technology. It depends also on the people who are involved in different projects. I could say that in my country, despite the crisis, the use of technology have been in certain way. We're being fighting for trying to reach a better or a higher educational context, a higher educational situation, let's say, by using or implementing different type of projects. Nationally, the same government have used what we talk one laptop per child, old LPC initiative, that is also used in countries like, as I said before, Argentina, Uruguay, places like Ecuador, many other countries like Afghanistan to Venezuela, from Nepal to Rwanda are similarly working on these type of projects, the OPC initiatives, all right? And they have worked in a certain way, but the use of one computer per child, it is not working well, since teachers don't know how to use the computer. They are not trained to use these computers. Children have the computers, but their professors don't know how to use them in the language classroom. There have been other initiatives, like individual initiatives from university professors or from private places in Venezuela who have tried to use technology. But there are very few cases. Private schools or private universities, they have tried to employ more sophisticated technology, and they have done a good job, but still it is reduced to a very small population, right? And despite that, I need the clicker. I don't have a clicker. Okay, over there. Next. I already talked about that. So this part was what I was talking about, the Venezuela and the use of different technologies, new technologies in the country. And then the next one, okay, very few learners have been benefiting from these sources. So finally, we have some institutional projects. And here is where where TESOL and Venezuela, and with the guidance of Dr. Christel Broady, we've been working. Last year we made a project that was approved by the U.S. Embassy, by the Department of State. So we brought Dr. Broady to Venezuela in October, and she trained 20 professors who have been doing a very good job on a project that she will explain later, all right? And you will see that what we're doing, we're working with our fingers, because it's very hard, to work without resources, without money. We continue, this is like a post-project that we have, and we've been working without any kind of help. But, this is something that is the result of this project sponsored by the U.S. Embassy. And I would like to leave Christel talk about that, okay? Thank you very much.
Thanks, Mary. So you get a call from the State Department that you're being approved for a project, and you have a situation that you don't really know what you're getting into. And I want to talk about logistics and how I addressed it, and the model I developed that's replicable. So let's move on really quick. So I just knew I had 20 teachers that were supposed to be trained for sustainable change, and so there were a lot of challenges. And because I'd been in Venezuela before, I knew that internet is unreliable, access to technology is unreliable, but I was supposed to train for call, right? How's that? That's a good challenge. So I'm going to give you a lot of the challenges and the solution. We had a lot of topics to cover, and so I decided as a solution to to implement carefully scaffolded cooperative learning in our group. The other challenge was that I had participants from all levels of instruction, access people, elementary people, higher ed people, teacher trainers. You think, how can we put all these people in one group together to get something out of the training? So you need to select topics that cross over all levels. And I did that with jigsaw activities where people were made specialists in a certain strategy and then went back to their own home groups to report on them, and everybody became a specialist. There were a lot of materials to develop, store, and share. So I decided on using Canvas as a learning platform so everybody could take that with them afterwards in the cloud, figuratively speaking. We also had no money for materials. Okay. So again, I tried to prepare everything ahead of time on Canvas so people could take that with them, and we created these very extensive wiki pages over the week built on the impetus that I created first. So we started out with seed cells and then developed more material. Also, one challenge was that the participants should have ownership of their learning, and I could only achieve that by making them learn all the stuff by themselves and not by me talking at them. That's a huge difference where most of the trainings fall flat on their face. You have the one-time big name specialist coming in, and giving you a lot of stuff, and then afterwards you don't really own it. You think it's really cool stuff, but how am I going to do it later? So I didn't want to do a training like that, and I wanted to give them the ownership, and I give you to this link to the website here. I also wanted to provide measurable and observable outcomes. I'm very sticklerish on this, and the measurable outcome was that we did our first EV in Venezuela in a conference where we transitioned from group projects and group work to individual presentations of each person becoming the specialist. And that was really one of the proudest things of my life, to see people working all night through the last night of the training to present their own specialist content to the whole group and people from outside. It was a huge transition in their learning. The other one was they were all working with colleagues from across the country, and there's a very, very high affective filter by not making a fool out of themselves, by trying out something new with colleagues that are their peers. And you need to be mindful of that in trainings, so I transitioned from group presentations where they had more emotional support by each other into the individual presentations, but they still had to present a measurable outcome at the end, so I knew everybody had gotten the point. And also one of the challenges of what I invented was to condition all participants to take what they learned and replicate it in their own community. I did not want to do a training where people said, this was really cool, but I don't know how to do it later. And that's what usually happens when you have these quick coming in and going out trainings. So one of the ways of achieving that to me was by group presentations and creating their own wiki pages that they owned themselves. They created and curated material. First started by curating materials and then went into creating materials. That was a huge step for them. Even though they're all specialists, but they were not used to doing these things, and they're not used to seeing themselves as researchers, as specialists, and they're not used to seeing their potential that they have. And I saw that when my last visit took place, how incredibly talented all these people were and all the stuff they knew, but they didn't know how much they knew, especially jointly, as a group for a country. So I use I'm kind of a specialist for COPs, and of course they're built on the notion that you share your values and vision, and that definitely was the case in our group. That's the situation in Venezuela, the commitment to making change happen, and the realization that educators have an incredibly vital role in changing the country. And that was a running theme throughout the entire training. And there's also a collective responsibility by educators, despite the situation in politics, to take an active role and not give up. I'm not going to read all the stuff to you, but there are different ways of approaching COPs. The one thing we need to remember is that COPs are completely fluid. They can be anything and everything at any given time, and they're fluid in how they develop. So in the beginning, you are like in the center of this, and you're very involved with your peers, but as a COP running person in their own communities, they can move more to the outside of the periphery of the COP and then take other people, let them take the vital roles. And they had to understand that in the training, that they had to give up control eventually and let other people take over so they can replicate it again in their communities, right? So it's a gift that keeps on giving, you know, but the basic tenet is that the trainer gives up control. But you're a coach. You're creating conditions in which other people can be successful. And that's a big transition for teachers, you know, where we're used to being in charge of things. And I think we did a wonderful job in creating this culture in our group to have buy-in by the group members into the notion that they are in charge of creating these conditions for other people then to take over in their communities. And as I traveled the country in different geographic areas later, I saw this already starting. I saw a librarian in Maracaibo saying, I want to be the resource person for a COP, for our COP here. And she had nothing to do with the call training, but she had been talking with persons that attended the training and said, I want to be part of this. And I have, as a librarian, access to building resource networks for our community, and she already bought into this. This was a couple of days later. So I saw this actually at work as I traveled the country afterwards. So again, you know, different visualizations of what a COP could look like. This goes back to a business model by before 20-some years, you know, it's implemented all over the world, and I think it's the only model for developing nations to develop capacity. The only model. So what are some strategic decisions that I made about the training? The objectives that I set for myself, and again, you know, remember that I didn't know exactly what we could do. I mean, yes, you have some charge, you have to call training. What does that mean, right? So my objective was, does anybody have any order? Oh, okay. Thank you. That participants will be able to identify valid information, and that's a really important point, information literacy. So when you go online, what is valuable information and what is not? So I wanted to achieve the point that students or the participants were able to say, this is something I should really use in my context of my work. That they will be able to curate. So we learned how to do the wiki pages where everybody can have access to it. Sharing with communities, developing strategies of sharing and delivering it, and then building their own COPs, curate and create more knowledge, starting to transition from curating to creating content for the specific context of Venezuela, okay? Because they have a different need than my teachers here in the US. And ultimately that they identify their role as independent professionals in the bigger world of TESOL, responsible for shaping the profession. They're not recipients of other people's knowledge. They are creators of knowledge. And that is a very big transition. Of course, as a teacher, trainer, I'm very familiar with that formation process, you know. So I put them all in groups. This is the practical side of things now. And first let them be guided by the resources I already curated on our learning platform. So I gave them examples of good curated knowledge, so they knew what we were looking for. And then I let them loose to find their own stuff. And they found really good stuff. And I encouraged them to present it in interesting ways. You with infographics, with really interesting tools. And this is where the call stuff came in. So they used all the different call tools that we have at our disposal, that I've provided for them, to present the knowledge then in groups to others. And everybody gets such a wealth of information, from not only the curated knowledge itself, but technology was used as a vehicle to present it. Does that make sense? So technology not for its own sake, but for delivering content. So the topics that we covered were what COPs are, because metacognitively everybody had to buy into this concept and learn about what it means. A really, really, really big step for most people was Bloom's taxonomy. To understand how to scaffold instruction with technology, so you start on the lower level of recognizing, remembering stuff, and quick drills in English classrooms, to actually applying and synthesizing, evaluating information, and that's a huge step, and we did all this in our training, in person. So digital literacy, oh my gosh, we talked so much about that, and as we all know about fake news and finding the right stuff out online, that's a really big thing, and understanding that just because students like to use their cell phones and click around all the time does not mean they know anything about how to use it for learning. Not at all. And so we teachers are still in charge of teaching them how to be good users of technology, right? We also talked about flipped classrooms, particularly as it pertains to call tools, front-loading vocabulary, and so forth. We learned about working in the cloud, Google Drive and extensions, and of course you can use them also offline. It's always a big issue when you work in a low-technology environment. You don't rely on the internet. In fact, my first trip, we had electric outages all the time. In a big conference room with 800 people went dark. We had to boot up everything again. Okay, so we'll do that. We have to find a way of also getting access to our cloud materials offline. We can do that, it's not a problem. So let's not get out of shape over it. We learned how to do podcasts, screencasts, and presenting videos. And many people don't know how to use it for instructional purposes, so we covered that. We also talked about the digital collaboration piece, which is huge when you do COPs, where you can asynchronously work together on creating something new with other colleagues. Maybe somebody has a kindergarten class somewhere across the country, and they came up with a wonderful solution for presenting something, and I can use that instead of reinventing the wheel. So that's a really important concept. And digital presentations, not using PowerPoint. I'm not the best model for what I'm preaching, I would say that. I think PowerPoints are awful, but for our purposes, it's okay. And everything in my training was project-based learning. They had to create products, they actually engaged with one another, they created their own platforms, and at the end we had the Electronic Village, the first one, and they were very proud of their presentations, and they were like half dead, right, at the end of the time. So here's some short-term results. The short-term result for our week together was the Electronic Village Conference, right? So to actually have people from outside come in, from different agencies, and to celebrate the newfound role of our professionals in the community, and that was a really big deal. And each person had their own table and groups to present to. Each participant was a specialist now and presented a different topic from others. And we do have in our actual presentations videos on YouTube of all kinds of stuff that's related to this event, if anybody's interested in watching it. Medium range, I was aiming for creation of COPs in the context of for English for specific purposes, ESP, and access program, higher education language institutes, and for-profits, because we had privates and publics, so that's a different focus, of course. Higher education in general, secondary education, primary, elementary. And we have a whole document here where we collected the evolution of our COPs, and though I was paid for a couple of weeks to come out there, but I have since been working with the group for free, and so we've been curating all the projects, collecting them, and actually did a research project out of it. Long-term result, we wanted to have a permanent establishment of an e-village at the National Convention, and people are really getting excited about it. Really cool thing, yesterday there was a meeting of the Caribbean and Central America group, and they are now using the webinar notion that they started in TESOL to also go with the other countries. So that's also a great result. Presentations at TESOL International, Thriving COPs, book that we write, article, and research that we actually did. So we have wonderful data that came out, transitioning from seeing yourself as a teacher to transitioning to seeing yourself as a professional, actually owning the profession. These are topics that we curated. Perceptions, is that your part? Yeah.
Hello everybody, my name is Monica Fernandez. I'm a professor at the University of Carabobo, and I was one of the lucky professors who took part of this amazing experience. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our experience. We started the COP with no knowledge of what these professional learning groups were. And we ended up developing professionally and individually. We got to curate information, to work collaboratively with other colleagues with different backgrounds, different knowledge, and we really grew together as a group. At the end, we were able to perform our first electronic village. It was a really great sensation for us. And what's more important right now is that we're just, these are some of the examples. I'm going backwards. Yeah, I can go backwards. These were some of the perceptions of the other groups. This is for you to see again, Christel. Oh, this is one. Is that it didn't stay there just with the electronic village. Most of the professors who took part, 20 professors from different educational grounds in Venezuela and levels, we're working right now replicating the model in other universities. This is my case at the University of Carabobo. I have 15 English teachers, and we're working right now creating our own professional learning experience. Of course, it's a work in progress. We're still at the very beginning of it. So I'm doing what I learned from Christel Broady and working the same way with my professors at the university, replicating this excellent model, because I can tell you it was really something that made us develop professionally. I'm going to leave it up to here because Christel has to.
Oh gosh, I wish I had you here all day because we have so much to share, all the individual projects, but we don't. So again, we're creating all these new PLCs, and I just want to say in summary, I'm not a big fan of programs where a big name person comes into a context and shares their infinite wisdom with you, and the other people receive it and partner it and maybe use it and maybe think, I'm never like that, okay? I'm an English learner, an immigrant, daughter of a refugee, and I know that you need to own your own destiny. You need to own it, and you cannot make that dependable on another person coming in, Especially when you have no resources, it's incredibly important to take your destiny in your own hands. And so I saw my role in going into providing a context for people to develop into these professionals and creating a coaching situation where I pulled back right from day one. I created the context, the materials, and for them to run with it. But then my role was to stand at the sideline and coach and answer questions, but not to be the driving force. Okay. And so I really encourage people to think about a model like this for nations that have low resources. And in a way, some areas in the US are like that too. Rural Appalachia, I'm from Kentucky now, we have the same situation there. So we need to help people to see themselves as the owners of their professional life. They're owning TESOL, they're owning the profession. So I hope this model was useful to you to see one way of approaching it, and I'd be glad to share with our webcasted audience or with any one of you more details on how to do that, because I could only touch on the highlights, unfortunately, with that short time. But ask me questions and build bridges together. Build bridges to for everybody to have a fair share of life. Okay. All right. Here's our contact information. I also have business cards, and with that, I'm going to give it to the next group. Right?
We do have about 5 minutes for questions. So we are webcasting, so we ask if you have a question, please use your teacher voice and speak loudly so we can pick that up on the microphone.
And I can repeat the question
Yeah,
too.
we can do that as well. But we have about 5 minutes before we begin the next class.
Anybody have a question? Or a web question? You have a question?
Yes, you did an excellent job of covering the topics and the manner in which you share the knowledge and also encourage people to take ownership. I'm curious, since you were talking about limited technology environments, and you mentioned a couple of situations where you faced some challenges, can you share any unique workarounds or solutions that you came up with the group as you worked?
And that's really an excellent question, because when you do call and you don't have the internet or electricity, Okay, so first of all, approaching call as an academic discipline, and if you cannot use it in person, sharing how to use it, is one way of doing it, right? Of course, that's not the most effective and ideal way, but you need to work with what you have. The other way is to find a lot of ways to work offline by downloading, for instance, Google Drive, to make them accessible offline to circumvent the situation. Handhelds, right? And I got a different plan for my own phone and my own devices. I got one that can, as a hotspot, connect to 5 different devices and makes me internet independent, but it works also in Venezuela and many other countries where I went to 12 countries last year, and the plan worked in each country when I trained teachers, and so I could pull up stuff with my telephone, and found a way to find a plan that works for me to use an internet that some people in the room did not have access to. But it's a trial and error thing, and I'd be glad to share details with people about which plan is, because I don't want to commercially advertise for anybody. But being very mindful of the situation and preparing for it is the key. Downloading everything beforehand, having the learning platform tools already downloaded beforehand, and then use the times when the internet is actually up to rearrange your activities, to use that time and do it quickly and then go back to another activity later. As a teacher, we need to be flexible at any time, right? So we just need to be flexible in a different way with technology. Does that help? Any questions from the web group? No? Does any one of you have any questions or comments? Does that look like something you're interested in, or? Okay. So if you have any questions afterwards, we can ask me in person and we can move on to the next panel. Thank you so much for coming here this early morning.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing your shared learning journey. I think there's a lot of excellent takeaways, as you said, that are replicable. And I should say for the audience, both here and online, that we do share the presentation files on the Call IS wiki for these sessions, and we'll have that link later available for you, so you can download the presentations directly if desired. All right. Our next group of presenters is getting settled here, I'll go ahead and introduce them as they're getting ready. I'm happy to introduce our next group of Ms. Jenkins from FHI 360 here not here, I'm always in Washington, D.C., so I'll say here. From Washington, D.C., and also Heidi Howland from the U.S. Department of State in Washington, D.C. Their presentation today is Adaptable Accessibility, Best Practices for EdTech in Low-Tech Environments. And the session is going to share how to make online courses both accessible and adaptable. The presentation is going to explore best practices for online programs designed for participants and teachers in varying technological contexts. Today, we hope that the audience will learn about responsive instructional design that's suitable for both browsers and mobile devices. So, welcome, BA.
Hi everyone, good morning. Thank you for being here so early. Christel mentioned that when the State Department calls you for a project, you never know what to expect. I work at the State Department and I still sometimes don't know what to expect. So, but I know what to expect with this project and what we're going to talk about today. It's very exciting. So my name is Heidi Howland and I work in the Office of English Language Programs, which is part of the Bureau of Educational and Cultural Affairs in the U.S. Department of State. Our office provides free resources, both online and in print, to teachers and learners of English all over the world. We also have online and face-to-face programs that we provide to teachers and learners all over the world. And today B and I are going to talk about best practices that we have come up with from one program, which is the American English e-Teacher program, which is an online program. So the AE e-Teacher program is an online professional development program for teachers of English around the world. And what we try to do is provide the latest teaching methodology with open educational resources. So for teachers to use in their classroom to adapt these resources, because they are OERs, the teachers are free to use them, adapt them to their own context, and use them in their own classroom. So we combine the latest methodology with OERs. We'll talk a little bit later, or I will talk a little bit later, and then B will talk a little bit later after me about the challenges of this, of how can you provide the up-to-date, like most current teaching methodologies in places where people might have challenges, such as what Christel talked about, with connectivity issues or even financial issues to get connected to the internet. So we'll talk about those a little bit later. This program is sponsored by the U.S. Department of State and is implemented by FHI 360 and is taught by ELT professionals. So we partner with ELT professionals. So the AE teacher is their online courses. There's also a community of practice, and Christel talked a lot about community of practices. We're big fans. And also OER, so free adaptable teaching materials. Again, like this is a really important part of our program to make sure that people have access to free materials that they can adapt and use in their own context. It's asynchronous activities, and we use Canvas as our LMS. And right now, it is in 103 countries. Our audience, so we want to enable people in low-tech, low-resource areas around the world to have access to materials and professional developments. So we want teachers in places that might not have access to other professional development opportunities to have access to it. So we are not, for example, there aren't a lot of teachers in this program who are in Western Europe, for example. So we really want to target those who don't have other opportunities. And this chart shows where we are by region. So AF is Africa, EAP is East Asia Pacific, EUR is Europe, NEA is Northeast Africa / Middle East, South Central Asia, and Western Hemisphere, which is Latin America and the Caribbean area. So challenges. There are a lot of challenges in developing and implementing this type of project. One is connectivity. So Christel talked a lot about what you have to do when people can't connect to the internet or connect often. So connectivity challenge is one reason why we make the materials to be able to be downloaded easily. So when you do have connectivity, right, you can download them quickly. But another point of connectivity is just financial. So that's also another challenge. That sometimes people don't have the money to pay for the data in order to download. So that's another challenge that we've had. Blackouts with connectivity, right? You can't connect to the internet when there's a blackout. And Bea and I were going over this presentation yesterday, and I gave the example. I lived in Malawi for 2 years and taught at a university. And once I got there, I asked my point of contact there, who'd emailed me before I came, maybe about 5 times. And when I got there, we had wireless internet at our university, but I think in the 2 years that I was there, it probably worked for 5 minutes. So my question to her was, how did you ever email me 5 times? Like, that's amazing that you were able to do that. And again, being flexible, like, she would compose the emails to me, and then as soon as the internet went on for whatever, 30 seconds or 1 minute in the school, she would click send and wait for it to send. So just being adaptable for that. So connectivity is a huge challenge in some of the regions and areas we work with eTeacher. Time zones is obviously another challenge. Whenever you are implementing a global program, there's a difference in time zones, and sometimes very vast difference. And censorship is also a challenge for us because there are certain countries that block certain platforms. For example, things as simple as YouTube, to us as simple as YouTube or Facebook, are blocked in some areas. And Google, thank you. And Canvas. Also, the difference of the teachers coming in who have various levels of background knowledge and experience with technology. So that's also a challenge when you are working with teachers from all over online, and they all come from different places and different backgrounds and have different levels of technology literacy. And I am going to turn it over to Bea to talk about IDLs.
Hi everyone, my name is Bea Jenkins. I work at FHI 360, which, as Heidi mentioned, is the implementing partner for the American English eTeacher program. We are in a cooperative agreement with the State Department, and we work very closely. So I'm going to introduce now some of our standards for overcoming these challenges that Heidi discussed. We developed a set of instructional design and online learning standards to help partners cope with the burden of some of these challenges in trying to provide quality courses to our participants who face these connectivity and censorship and background challenges. So when we created these standards, they were intended to guide partners and help make sure that the courses and materials met the needs of the average AEE teacher participant. Of course, the academic and private sector partners that we work with are indeed, as Heidi mentioned, ELT professionals, experts in their fields. However, no matter how great an online course is, it has to be tailored for the audience. So that's why these standards were created. And of course, we want to support the goals of our program, which are to provide participants with access to the latest language teaching methods and free adaptable resources. So these standards were created with 5 domains in mind, 5 macro categories involved in educational technology, and those would be access, language, format, learning environment, and assessment. And each domain is then further divided into standards, and each standard has its own performance indicators. For the purpose of today's presentation, we're only going to discuss domain 1, which is access. And that is because, well, that is the topic of this hot topic panel, but also because the access standards kind of trickle into all of the other standards, because there's really no point in making sure that the language and format and learning environment and assessment meet the standards unless they are also accessible. So, all right. So domain 1 access is divided into 3 individual standards: course hosting, technology, and open environments. And we will go over examples of each. But I wanted to go over especially course hosting because it seems very simple, but you would be surprised as to how easily we can forget that everything needs to be hosted within one LMS. So the standard of course hosting involves hosting all courses and assignments and materials on the LMS itself. Now the rationale behind that is that the less linking out there is, the better it is for participants' connectivity issues, especially since we have so many users accessing our courses on mobile devices, right? If you're opening up new windows to look at a link and you need a PDF reader, or you need something to access that link as well, or perhaps it's blocked in your country, that presents a lot of issues for our participants. So all content needs to be available on the LMS, which Heidi mentioned is Canvas. That's the LMS we are currently using for our courses. And assignments also need to be multimodal, which means that because participants have different connectivity, they are able to submit assignments in different ways. And we'll go over examples of that. Then we have technology. Again, to get over connectivity and bandwidth issues, we need to make sure that there are alternative materials presented, and not just by request from participants. And again, in open environments, the recurring theme, assignments are available in multiple formats. You're able to provide alternatives to material or blocked and censored sites. So again, these all kind of blend into each other because the same issues keep coming up, and we are reinforcing this with different performance indicators and different rationales to try to keep this streamlined and keep it in the LMS. All right, so the first one we're going to go over is course hosting. So that would be domain 1, standard 1. Again, I mentioned the performance indicators there. So we have an example here from one of our courses. This is an example from our Teaching Grammar Communicatively course, which was designed and instructed by World Learning just this past winter term, which just ended. So this is their mid-course assignment, which involves writing a lesson plan. So this slide shows 3 different ways for participants to submit this assignment. And participants choose the method which is easiest for them, for their bandwidth issues, for their access to the LMS, for their connectivity issues. So if you see on the left, this assignment can be submitted either through a text entry box or a file upload. Okay, so that means that there's a text entry box where they could copy and paste their entire lesson plan or type it into the text entry box. Okay, now I know that for a lot of you working at American universities, the formatting behind that might really bother a lot of people. But again, these are participants who may only have, as Heidi mentioned, a few minutes of internet per week, and they need to do their assignments offline. Another way for them to submit this assignment on the left-hand side is to upload a file, so that if they do have access to Microsoft Word or some kind of text software, they could upload that file into Canvas and submit it that way. On the right-hand side, you see an alternative submission option in the form of a quiz. So this is an online quiz that would allow participants to actually answer or enter the different components of a lesson plan in an online quiz format. And I believe we have a sample of that. So this is an example of one of the quiz questions, and they would submit the quiz after they'd entered the different components of the lesson plan. So tedious, yes, but if you are facing the challenges that we discussed and have limited access, this might be, the option that participants need. All right. So the next standard is technology. So this requires that no mandatory use of an online tool or device could be required that's not available in all areas or to all participants. So an example of this is that, you cannot require, for example, participants to use a Google Doc or Microsoft Word. Okay, and this also ties back to the multimodal submission. Again, they're able to complete this assignment either with a text entry or a file upload. Of course, those of you familiar with Canvas know that there are also other ways to submit assignments, a media file, a URL, which could also be submission options, but they cannot be required. All right. Oh, sorry, could we go back? I just wanted to mention that this is an example of an assignment from our, this is also from Teaching Grammar Communicatively, also taught by World Learning. Just wanted to give credit. Yes. And then finally, open environments. Again, programs such as Microsoft Office Suite and Google products cannot be required for resources or assignments. So we run into a lot of issues with courses that we're trying to adapt that use Google products and Google Suites because they're so great for collaborative learning. This is true. However, a lot of countries have censorship issues with Google, and we're trying to meet the needs of every country here. So while assignments can give working in a Google Doc or creating a Google presentation as an option, it cannot be required. Also, participants need to be provided with alternatives to the blocked materials. So I'll bring an example here from our EdTech course, which was designed and instructed by Iowa State University, in which lectures are presented in short videos, which are YouTube videos embedded in Canvas. Now, YouTube, as you know, is blocked in China. So for participants for whom YouTube is blocked, they are there are graphic video transcripts for those participants who cannot watch the videos. So the transcript is tied to different slides from the presentation, and this transcript is available on the content page in Canvas. Participants don't need to message their instructor and let them know that they can't access the video. Everything is hosted in one content page. The lectures, the videos, the transcripts. And this is available in a downloadable PDF, which we have found to be the most readable form for participants. So, I wanted to point out that, I guess we could go to the last slide, which is just the references that were used in creating these standards. They are, of course, a work in progress and do have, limitations. So, for example, we brought up the example of the EdTech course. Teaching educational technology in low bandwidth environments presents its own set of challenges. So we believe that in the future we're going to have to create a different version of the EIDL guidelines specifically for EdTech courses that gives a little more leeway for partners just because of the nature of the topic. Also, I want to point out the struggle between trying to present the most up-to-date language teaching methods and keeping things accessible and available to low bandwidth environments. Those two goals often conflict with one another, and we're left trying to find some kind of balance that works for all participants while still giving them the best quality professional development courses that we can. And I also want to point out that these are not the only guidelines that that partners receive. We also have TESOL content guidelines and Creative Commons guidelines, because as Heidi mentioned, one of our goals in the eTeacher program is to provide participants with free adaptable resources. And OER is a term that shouldn't be thrown around unless participants can legally adapt those resources, which is why everything in our courses is available and licensed through Creative Commons attribution licensing, so that participants are able, as long as they attribute the source, to adapt those resources to their particular environment. So again, that's something that a lot of people aren't yet familiar with. I know OER is still kind of a blossoming topic, but so we provide our partners with some guidance on that as well. So I will now open it up to questions. Yes?
With that example of the quiz, would that automatically save
Just a
after
little bit,
each?
please. Sorry. Teacher voice, please.
Sorry. With the example of the quiz, would that be automatically saved after each question? So like if if something happened, it would be able to access where they left off.
That's a great question. So I believe that the content, the page doesn't expire, however, and that you can pause it. However, I don't think that if everything suddenly crashed that it would be saved unless you clicked save and resume later. Again, work in progress. Yeah, Canvas doesn't have an auto save, unfortunately. Okay, well, if anyone would like a copy of this presentation, we have an email sign up, and I also have some business cards in case anyone thinks of questions later. So thank you very much.
Thank you all for attending today. I want to say again a thank you to Christel, to Mary, to Monica, to Heidi, and to Bea for sharing their ideas and their work with us. I think that there were some common themes among the two panels about challenges, but beyond that, perseverance, flexibility, adaptability, and knowing that the most convenient technology solution is not going to be the most appropriate way forward in many places around the world. So a lot of great ideas to share. We will get the link up here for you all, for those of you who like access to download these presentations and to have the contact information for the presenters. So I will work on that now. It will be up shortly. But again, thank you for joining us. And I think the panelists will be here for a few more minutes if you have individual questions. So thank you.